So this time of year you can see all this dead cattail behind me. There's still a lot of uses here and life is starting to begin this time of year. We're in mid-spring and the shoots are starting to come up with the cattails. Cattail's been nicknamed the supermarket of the swamp for a very good reason. It's got a plethora of uses. We're just going to be covering some of them today. Now there's quite a few plants down here that can look a lot like cattail. There's certain grasses and sedges that can kind of get you confused. There's also a plant out here called blue flag iris. It's very toxic, can get you very sick. So you've got to identify your plants very well. Cattail has very broad, succulent leaves that come up to a very rounded spear point. Very simple to identify once you look at it closely. You've identified it a few times and practiced. You can get very good at identifying this and making sure. You've got to make sure you're lookalikes. You've got to be careful out here. You got those evil twins out here that really want to mess up your day. But what we can do with these young shoots is you grow in, and you see these really light colored ones. I pull those gently, they come up. And this, that's the best piece. Very sweet, very tender. To me, it actually tastes like a mix of cucumber and celery, so I really like eating these, especially during the hot time of day. You can actually eat this rather than having to put a lot of heavy carbs in your stomach. And you basically stop eating when it gets a little woody or a little fibrous. Very easy to pick. You just go along, munching away. Very simple to gather. And tasty too. So if you take the individual leaf, you can actually get cordage out of this. Now, the taller they are, the more cordage you can get, the more fiber it's going to be. What we can do with this is you can't just use it as is. You can do two things. You can either dry it and then use it, or you can process it and then dry it. You have to dry it before you can make rope out of it though. What we use to process it is quite simple. We use a toothed comb of some sort. So if you have a hard stick and you carve little teeth on the end of it, or you take even an actual hair comb, you can actually use that to process. What we have with us is a Dragonfly Multi-Tool, which has got a fiber comb purposely cut into it at the top. Good for processing tinder, but also for processing cordage like this. Now these dead stalks and these dead leaves, they're not as fibrous, and the fibers are a little more brittle, but you can still process them for certain things. If I go through here, you can see, whoops, if I go nice and gentle, I can fray it up. And these little shavings that are coming off from the comb can be used as a tinder. Very easy to work with. Now the heads of the old cattails can be taken off. And they can be used for a lot of stuff. If you look in here, you see this pink. It's actually a rot, basically a fungal attack attacking the plant, its seeds. These ones never went to seed, so we can use them. We don't have to feel bad about killing off a plant. It's a very easy tinder. The more you fluff it up, the better it's going to work. And it takes a spark very readily. However, there's a trick to it. You have to have other tinder that's willing to hold that flame. This takes the spark and brings it to flame. If you have some shredded up, really finely shredded up birch bark on the back end, the spark as the flame goes back, catches those and keep going with it. Another trick with this stuff is if you're not using a ferro rod but you're using a flint and steel kit, you need to make this stuff into a little bit better of a tinder. So you can either compress it between two pieces of wood, two flat rocks. What I actually like to use is a big bean can and a slightly smaller bean can. Put this into the big bean can, put the other can inside and pack that full of rocks and leave it overnight. The longer you leave it, the more it's going to be compressed and processed into basically a very coarse felted fabric. Then you can rip off chunks and char that as char cloth. Very easy to work with. But again, it does take a spark very well in any situation. Just depending on how weaker the spark is, the more prep it takes, just like anything else out here. Now, there's other parts of this plant that are edible, not just the shoots. Come a couple more weeks, when it gets its flower head, you can take that and cook it almost like corn on the cob. You can even steam it, you can boil it, you can barbecue it, however you want. It tastes pretty good. A little bit later, the pollen starts to form, and you can collect the pollen with the pollen husk. Collect it all in one and mix that with things like acorn flour, cornmeal, anything like that to make it bind. It makes a very good pancake or bannock. The roots, though, are edible. A lot of people say all the year through, but honestly, when it gets to minus 30 outside, you can't really get to them very easily. And if they're in the mud, that mud's frozen solid. So I say three seasons of the year rather than all year round. The way to get to the roots and the tubers is down through the muck. The more open the water is and the more these are floating on their own in rafts, the easier it is to get those roots. If they're right on the ground, you're going to be digging for a while and you're going to be getting smaller roots. Two pieces of advice. First and foremost, be aware of where you're harvesting. I remember when I was 14 years old, I made a very big mistake with that. Harvesting cattails right beside a ballpark that had been used with DDT and God knows what else over the years. Made me a very, very sick kid. The other concern is animals in the water. If you're in alligator country, this might not be the best thing for you. In Ontario, the biggest concern here is snapping turtles. So I like to give a bit of a perimeter survey and see if I see a shell moving. If I don't see anything, I just go in nice and smooth. And I go in along the root, so I'm not going to be disturbing something by poking it in the head. There's a bit of a log here. I'm going to move out of the way. Move my hand down, down, down into the muck. Now I've found the roots, the tubers really. And I'm just going to coax them from the ground, going along nice and slow. To the next plant, I'm going to break it off there because I don't really need that long of a root. Wash it off as best I can in the water, bring it up. And if I take off all this mucky little roots, you can see the tuber. If I cut that near the end and give you a cross section, you can see hard starches in the middle, surrounded by a very squishy, very wet coating or skin or bark. That stuff, what we do with this, and we'll show that in a moment, is simply put that right on the coals and bake it. You bake it in the coals or roast it in the coals, barbecue it, and once it all gets black, you peel that back and you eat the starches right off the inside. Some people will actually clean these off and dry them and then grind them up in a little pool of water and try and get starches from that. I don't really see a reason in doing that. It comes out kind of nasty and there's not really a point to that. But there's other things that are edible here. If you look here, these are the younger shoots that haven't come up yet. One nickname for this is Cossack Asparagus. And these things are actually really nice, broken off and eaten either raw or steamed. So as you can probably figure out by now, cattail's got a lot of uses. We've only scratched the surface, really just the tip of the iceberg on the whole concept of cattail having uses. Another one that I didn't talk about is because I've never used it, is that the inside between the leaves, there's a slime that can be used as a very, very mild topical anesthetic. And that I've never tested before, so I can't confirm nor deny whether it works. But there's so many uses. There's just so many. You can use it for fire making. You can use it for making rope. You can make it for roofing, bedding. You can use it for clothing. You can weave it into a lot of different stuff. You can also use it as a food. You can use it as the roots, the shoots, the seed head, the pollen. Almost the entire plant is edible at one point or another throughout the year. And that makes it a very important plant to learn. Out of all the plants that I teach out here in the woods, this is one of my favorites to teach because no matter what, I'm going to have something to demonstrate about. And when you're out here in the bush, having something that you can always depend on, well, that makes it your best friend out here. And that's what I love about cattails. It's pretty much my friend. So practice your plants, learn your plants, study as much as you can about plant life, but find all the uses. Don't just read that a flower is edible. Find out what other parts of a plant are edible. Always grow and grow and grow into your uses of all the parts of a plant or a tree or a shrub or a fen or anything like that. So thanks for watching. This is Caleb Musgrave signing off. Tread softly.